Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, thank you so much for this opportunity. Through this video, I would like to present my paper. My paper is about cleavage structure change in the 2019 general elections. My name is Haris Mubarak. I'm from Sultan Thaha, Saifuddin, Jambi, and postgraduate program of Governance and Policy Analysis, University of Canberra. For introductions, general election in Indonesia, the issue of communism, khilafah, radical Islam become a conflict description in this election. Even though the social cleavage issue increased, some researchers mentioned that this issue did not have any impact on presidential candidates' votes. Otherwise, some researchers assert that social cleavage still exists in Indonesia. However, these differences should look at not only on presidential election, but also should look at the legislative election. If we look at the presidential election result, Prabowo won in some Muslim regions, while Jokowi in non-Muslim regions. But even though Prabowo won in Muslim regions, such as South Sulawesi, Jokowi party coalition still won in this area. In Riau, Prabowo won 60%, but Golkar and PDIP still influence voters in this area. These differences show a gap between presidential election and legislative election. If cleavage structure vote choice, then we should see consistent patterns of voting between the presidency and legislatures. But instead, we find split ticket voting. Therefore, this paper will analyze the impact of social cleavage issue on presidential and legislative elections based on this gap. To look social cleavage in Indonesia, I use social cleavage approach that was proposed by Lipset and Rokan. Lipset and Rokan states that political party emerge from the differences in community to present and protect the community interests. For example, Labour Party in England emerged to represent the working class. In Malaysia, MCA, UMNO MIC represent the ethnicity. Because communities have differential structure, Lipset and Rokan divided some conflict in communities into some forms, namely conflict between church and state, center and periphery, urban and rural, working class and employer, tenant and landowner. To analyze this problem, I use secondary data. Actually, this research use quantitative as a primary data, but during elections, many research institutions had conducted survey, so this data can help to analyze the social cleavage. I also compare between one survey result to others. Then I use online newspaper to understand the event, cases, and issue. In the 2019 president election showed that some cleavage occurred in Indonesia. First, cleavage between church and states, or in Lipset and Rokan term, conflict between religious and secular groups. In these elections, Jokowi and his allies used the issue of radical Islam to describe Prabowo supporter. Meanwhile, Prabowo and his supporter used communism revival to attack Jokowi. This issue caused some problem for Islamic organization leaders that support Prabowo because they have got many problems, especially accusation of hate speech and hoax. Habib Rizik, for example, got many accusations from his opponents. The controversial issue is online chat sex between Rizik and a woman. Then Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia also was dissolved by the government. The ruling party succeeded in restricting the Prabowo and his supporters through persecution and intimidation, and also through the police power to arrest the opposition. Emerging this issue depend conflict between Islam and secular nationalists. Second cleavage is between Muslim traditionalists and modernists. This conflict occurred especially between Muhammadiyah and Nahdlatul Ulama. This conflict actually is a conflict that can be tracked since the form of Muhammadiyah and Nahdlatul Ulama. Muhammadiyah is founded to purify Islam from traditional and cultural influences. Meanwhile, Nahdlatul Ulama established to defend the traditional and cultural value. This cleavage re-emerged in 2019 presidential election. Nahdlatul Ulama firmly stated to support Jokowi, while Muhammadiyah supported to Prabowo. The term of Jokowi and Prabowo in some regions could be a conflict description between traditionalists and modernists. Prabowo won in West Sumatra, Banten and West Java, and also Aceh. West Sumatra is known as Muhammadiyah and Tarbiyah Islamiyah basis, like West Banten and West Java, while Jokowi won in traditional areas such as East and Central Java. Another cleavage is ethnic cleavage, especially between Javanese and non-Javanese. We can look at the some surveys show that Jokowi got support from Javanese around 60 to 70% based on some research institution, while Prabowo got support from Malay people such as Betawi, Kalimantan, and Malay in Sumatra. Another cleavage is between Islam and non-Islam. In this presidential election, Prabowo had been supported by some Islamic leaders. So, Prabowo was described as a leader who could protect the Muslim interests, even though Prabowo's mother and his sibling are not Muslim. Based on some survey, the non-Muslim gave the support for Jokowi. 5. Center periphery cleavage. Some outer islands, such as Sumatra and Sulawesi, tended to support the challenger than the incumbent. In the previous election, Jokowi won in some provinces in Sumatra and Sulawesi. However, in 2019 election, almost all provinces in Sumatra support the challenger. The increased Prabowo vote also occurred in Sulawesi, Kalimantan, and West Papua, even though Prabowo lost in this area, but his vote increased. Another cleavage is urban and rural. Since democratization, urban and rural cleavage, especially in the presidential election, still influence the electorate. Mujani explains that rural area tend to vote for incumbent. In contrast, urban people tend to vote the challengers because they have an attitude to change. The change of urban attitudes depend on the incumbent performance. In the 2019 president election, some surveys show that Jokowi won in rural and in urban area are more competitive. Another cleavage is education or education cleavage. In Indonesian president election, the level of education have an impact on voter choices. For example, in 2004 president election, Megawati Hashim Muzadi obtained 62% from the electorate who have education at elementary or less. In 2019, the level of education also influenced voter in presidential candidate. The electorate who had education at elementary school or less tended to vote incumbent. Meantime, the electorate who have a diploma or bachelor tended to vote challenger. Some survey before election show the lower the level of voter education, the higher the vote for Jokowi. Last cleavage is employment and income. In the 2019 president election, the blue-collar worker tend to choose the incumbent. And then white collar or professional were more competitive between Jokowi and Prabowo. Now, the parliamentary election in the 1999 and also 2004 election, the social cleavage were still important for political party support. For example, Golkar represented the periphery, especially in outer island, such as in Sulawesi. PDIP represented center, such as Bali, Java, and other Christian region. Meantime, some Islamic parties, such as PAN and PKS, represented urban Muslim. PKB represented rural area. In that 2019 legislative election, the social cleavage issue had declined. For example, regionalism tend to not become the main issue that could influence the voter because political parties have developed to be more national parties than represented local area. Cleavage between rural and urban area also have changed. Some political parties that was identified as urban or rural could not maintain their supporter basis, so that this party tended to be catch-all parties. Because political parties support in urban and rural area could change from one election to other election. Besides that, church states or Islam and nationalism could not become a primary factor influencing the electorate. The number of Islamic parties declined, and the vote for Islamic parties also not stable. In the 2019 election, the leader personality and evaluation of party leader performance had become as an essential aspect for the parliamentary election. Then, parliamentary candidates also were stronger to influence the voter. A survey conducted by a nation survey circle and also LIPI showed that the electorate tended to choose the candidate they know than political parties. The voter tendency to select the candidates that they know in 2019 election was because of open system. The system encouraged candidates to promote themselves than their parties because they have to compete with other parties' candidates and also candidate in their parties. Then, the large number of candidates made some problematic for citizens to vote because the electorate has to determine the candidate on some levels, such as in the city, regency, province, national, regional representative council, and also presidential elections. Another factor is split ticket voting. In one side, political parties in the national level support one candidate, but in the local, political parties allow the member to choose and promote to another candidate. For example, Democratic Party, PBB, PAN, start to support one presidential candidate, but this party allow the member to choose other candidate in the local level, with the reason party need to adapt with local voter. The last is money politic. Money politic has become a significant issue in the 2000 in Indonesian election since the 1999 elections. Money politics has changed the voting behavior and reduced the ideological and social cleavage ties between political parties and electorate. Money politics has caused the political party cannot maintain the voter. In the LIPI survey, only 14% of voters vote for the same party from previous election to 2019 election. Conclusion: open list system in Indonesia has influenced voter alignment, so that the issue of social cleavage do not influence the voter in the legislative election. But the cleavage structure in presidential election can change in the future election that could be influenced by electoral rule, number of candidates, and combination between Javanese and non-Javanese. Okay, thank you very much. So this is my presentation. Thank you very much for watching my video presentation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.